This thrilling story shook all of Sweden, and it's sure to bring tears to your eyes. Today, we delve into a chilling case that grips the psyche. In psychological terms, there exists a condition known as Adelie syndrome, named after Adele Hugo, the youngest daughter of the renowned French author Victor Hugo. Adele was not only strikingly beautiful, but also a gifted pianist. However, her unrequited love profoundly impacted her mental well-being, leading her to obsessively shadow her unreciprocated lover. She assumed his wife's identity, inadvertently sabotaging his career and personal life. Tragically, Adele spent 43 of her 84 years confined within the somber walls of a psychiatric hospital. Adelie syndrome describes an intense fixation where one becomes so consumed by another that they lose control over their emotions. This condition, alarmingly common, typically manifests in behaviors that converge on insanity, driving the obsessed to engage in desperate, unpredictable, and often violent acts. While many can find relief through professional psychological help, severe cases may require hospitalization and extensive therapy. One of the most notorious instances occurred in 2008 with Emma Ljungstig, whose case sent shockwaves across Europe, marking one of the darkest chapters in Swedish forensic history. Initially deemed potentially insane with insufficient evidence to proceed, Emma revealed her true nature in a dramatic courtroom display that nearly destroyed an innocent young family. Born in Stockholm on February 16, 1985, Emma spent her formative years in a modest household, the younger of two sisters. Her life took a pivotal turn at 19 when she married Nicholas, a high school sweetheart, cementing their young love into a formal union. Nicholas was just a little older than Emma when they got married, and Emma was already expecting their first child. By the time she was 20, Emma had given birth to a son named Max. A year and a half later, she had a daughter, Saga. Even though they now had two children, Emma and Nicholas were still very young and found family life challenging. They often argued over small things and struggled to understand each other. Soon after Saga was born, they decided to split up. Deciding who the children would live with was very difficult and caused a lot of pain. Nicholas wanted to help support the kids financially and also be a big part of their lives. Emma agreed at first, but then she started a new relationship and moved to a small town called Arboga, about 150 kilometers away from Stockholm, with her new partner and the kids. Nicholas didn't want her to take the kids so far away because he wanted to see them every day. They went to court many times to try to sort out custody of the children. Nicholas even made threats against Emma, which she reported to the police. They couldn't find a peaceful way to solve their problems, and both wanted to have the kids live with them only. During this tough time, Emma met Torgny Hellberg online. Despite Emma being 23 years old and already having two kids, Torgny didn't mind. He had always wanted a family and was ready to accept her children as his own. They first lived in a small house that Torgny got from his family. But when they decided to get married, they moved to a bigger house where there was enough space for everyone to have their own cozy room. Torgny had a good job that paid well, and Emma stayed home to take care of the kids in the house. She was trained as a designer and planned to work in that field in the future. The couple had planned to get married in the summer of 2008, but their plans were never completed. March 17, 2008 started like any other Monday. Torgny left for work early, while Emma stayed home with Max, who was 3 years old, and Saga, who was 1.5. That evening, Emma was making dinner and talking online with her sister Katarina about a gift for their parents' upcoming anniversary. At about 6:30 p.m., Torgny called Emma to tell her he would be late coming home from work and said they could start eating without him. After the call, Emma went back to doing things around the house, fed the children, and then sat down at the computer again to keep chatting with her sister. Suddenly, at 7:07 p.m., Emma stopped replying in the middle of typing a message. Katarina thought this was strange because it looked like Emma was about to send a message but never did. 5 minutes later, worried, Katarina tried to call Emma, but she didn't answer. So, Katarina called Torgny. He was almost home and told her not to worry, thinking Emma was just busy with the kids and would call back soon. When Torgny got home, he found the front door was not locked. He walked in and first thought the mess was from the kids playing. But then he saw brown stains on the floor and realized with fear that it was blood. Torgny called out Emma's and the children's names loudly several times, but no one answered. In the hallway, he saw something on the floor that looked like a doll at first because it was in such an odd position. But as he got closer, he realized it was Saga, lying in a pool of her own blood. Her head and face were badly injured and covered in blood. Not far from her, he found her brother Max, in a similar terrible state, with a broken skull. Their mother, Emma, was also on the floor, covered in blood and lying in a strange way. Her face was severely damaged. It looked like none of them were alive. Shocked, Torgny quickly pulled out his phone with shaking hands and called for help. Just then, Emma moved slightly and made a loud noise. Soon after, police and paramedics got there. They found a weak pulse in Emma and the kids and started trying to save them right away. The scene was awful. Everyone wondered what could have harmed a young woman and her children so badly. But the main focus was on saving their lives, so they were rushed to the nearest hospital. From the beginning, the paramedics were not sure if Emma and the kids would survive the trip to the hospital. However, they were still alive when they arrived. They all had severe injuries to their heads, brain damage, and had lost a lot of blood. The doctors did everything they could, but didn't make any promises about their chances. Max and Saga were in very critical condition, and it seemed unlikely that they would be able to breathe on their own if they did survive. Emma's condition was also very serious, but a bit more stable. Emma was put in a medically induced coma and connected to machines to help her body heal. While the doctors were working hard to save Emma and the children, forensic experts were at the house looking for clues to understand what had happened. The house was a mess, with things thrown everywhere and blood on the floors and walls. The medics who came to help had moved things around and made more of a mess trying to reach the victims. They had to figure out which footprints were from the medics, and if any were from the person who did this. The terrible attack had happened very quickly, in about 13 minutes. Emma's last message to her sister was at 7:07 p.m., and Torgny called the police in panic at 7:20 p.m. The violent way the attacker had hurt the victims suggested that he had a personal reason and really disliked them. The weapon seemed to be something heavy like a hammer, but it was not found at the house, which meant the attacker probably took it with him. Torgny was the first person the police suspected. He wasn't married to Emma and wasn't the father of her children, so the police thought maybe they had a big fight. But Torgny had a solid alibi. First, he was at work late, which his boss and coworkers confirmed. Also, at the time when his family was attacked, he was seen on several security cameras walking down the street. Even though he had an alibi, the police still took a detailed statement from Torgny. They hoped he might have seen or heard something that could help solve the crime. Torgny couldn't remember anything unusual except for the front door being unlocked when he got home. He thought this might mean that Emma had let the attacker inside. After the police questioned him, they let him go. He then told Emma's family about what had happened. Emma's parents quickly drove from Stockholm to Arboga to go to the hospital. On the way, they heard on the radio that Max and Saga had died from their injuries without ever waking up. The police started to suspect Nicholas, Emma's ex-husband and the father of the children, as the new suspect. Nicholas and Emma had divorced over a year ago and had a lot of problems. They fought a lot, especially about who would take care of the children, and Emma had even reported Nicholas to the police for making threats. It seemed possible that after losing the custody battle, Nicholas might have hurt the children and Emma in anger. The police found Nicholas and took him into custody. He was very upset when he heard about the deaths of Max and Saga, crying and asking if there had been some mistake. When the police accused him of the crime, he was shocked and then yelled that he would never hurt his children, whom he loved deeply. When asked where he was at the time of the attack, Nicholas said he was in another city for business. This sounded suspicious, but soon enough, his alibi was confirmed. He was indeed 120 miles away when the attack happened. Meanwhile, the police kept looking for more clues and worried about Emma, who was still in critical condition. Forensic investigators worked hard at the crime scene, looking for any clues or signs of the attacker. It was clear the attacker had worn gloves because there were no fingerprints, and no clear shoe prints were left either. The investigation was complicated because many doctors had come to the house to help the victims and had left many footprints. The police needed to figure out which footprints didn't belong to the doctors, Torgny, or the victims. The police were worried that the attacker might try to enter the hospital to harm Emma again, especially since she was the only witness who could identify him if she woke up. To keep her safe, they placed guards outside her room all day and night. Meanwhile, they talked to neighbors to see if anyone had seen anything unusual. One neighbor mentioned seeing a stranger in black clothes near Emma and Torney's house around 5 p.m. on the day of the attack. The neighbor thought it was odd but couldn't see the person's face because it was covered by a hood. The neighbor thought the stranger might be a girl because she looked short and frail. This mysterious figure was also caught on a street camera near the crime scene, dressed in black and with a hood over their head. The police also thought the person in the video looked like a short, frail girl. Who was she, and why would she want to hurt Emma and her children? The police decided to show the video to Torgny to see if he recognized the stranger or had any ideas about who it might be. When the video started, Torgny looked very surprised and turned pale. He thought the person might be his ex-girlfriend, 31-year-old Christina Schurer, but he wasn't sure. Who is Christina Schurer? She was born in 1977 in Hanover, Germany. When she was young, her dad left the family and didn't talk to her much after that. This made her very sad and affected how she acted. Christina was a strong and determined girl, but she was also hard to get along with. As a teenager, she went to the United States for school and lived in New York for a few years, where she studied history and archaeology. She loved to travel and joined many digging trips around Europe. In 2006, Christina got a job as a tour guide at a hotel in Crete, Greece. That summer, Torgny, who was 26 years old, came to the hotel for a holiday and liked Christina a lot. They quickly started a relationship. Christina was 29 years old, a little older than Torgny, but that didn't bother them. They were together for the week Torgny was on vacation, and after he went home, they still talked on the phone and sent messages online. A few months later, Christina visited Torgny in Sweden and asked to stay at his house. Torgny felt she was being too pushy, especially when she asked him to go on a trip to the mountains. He said no and hoped they wouldn't meet again. But Christina kept calling and writing, asking to meet up. In January 2007, Torgny told her on the phone that they were no longer together. Torgny told Christina they should not meet again, but she acted as if she didn't hear him. She kept calling, asking to visit him, and inviting him on vacations. In spring 2007, Christina came back to Sweden and started following Torgny around. She tried to convince him to get back together, even though he told her he was seeing someone else. Then, Christina said she had left some of her things at his house during her last visit and needed to pick them up. Torgny agreed, but when they got to his house, she tried to seduce him. After he firmly said no, she told him he would regret it. 3 months later, Christina came back, saying sorry for her behavior and trying again to convince him to restart their relationship. When he said no, she called him that evening and said she had taken pills because she couldn't live without him. Torgny quickly called an ambulance for her and told her family about what she had done, suggesting they get her psychiatric help. After getting the necessary care at the hospital, Christina's mom took her to a psychiatric hospital where she stayed for over a month. However, the treatment didn't help much. Christina was still obsessed with Torgny, constantly thinking of ways to meet him again and making up reasons to see him. In October 2007, Christina moved to Sweden and lived in a suburb of Stockholm. She rented an apartment with another girl and started following Torgny again. When she met him, she told him that she had given birth to his son and had given the child to a foster family. Torgny was shocked by this news. He was especially confused because the last time they had been close was over a year ago, and they had met a few times since then. But Christina had never looked pregnant. Christina gave vague answers and kept adding new details each time she spoke. In January 2008, after many failed attempts to meet Torgny, she sent him a message. She told him that their supposed son was diagnosed with a hereditary disease and that they needed to go to Germany together to see him. She also mentioned that the child's adoptive father would contact him with details. At this time, Torgny and his girlfriend Emma were moving to a new house, and Emma knew about the whole situation. She thought Christina was just trying to trick Torgny into going to Germany and that there was no son at all. When Torgny got a call from a man claiming to be the adoptive father, he asked detailed questions about the boy, like his birth date and the hospital he was born in. The caller became annoyed, avoided the questions, and eventually hung up. This made Torgny sure that there was no son and that Christina had made up the story and had someone pretend to be involved. Detectives found out where Christina was living and went to her address. Her roommate answered the door and said that Christina had packed her things in a hurry the day before, saying she was going back to Germany. A check confirmed that she had left, so the Swedish police asked for help from the German police to arrest her. On March 20th, they issued a warrant for her arrest. When Christina was arrested, she said it was all a mistake and she had nothing to do with the attacks. She was brought back to Sweden on March 29th, but she wasn't allowed to meet Torny. Although she remained calm, she kept asking to meet or call her ex-boyfriend. The police thoroughly searched Christina's rented apartment. They took her phone and laptop to check them and also examined all her clothes. However, they found no traces of blood on anything. By this time, investigators had figured out which bloody shoe prints at the crime scene were not from the medics or the family. They determined the prints were from athletic shoes and even identified the brand and model from the tread pattern. The size matched Christina's, but she claimed she never owned that model of sneakers. Her roommate, however, said those were indeed her shoes. Detectives found more interesting things on Christina's laptop. There were many photos of Torny, some with Christina and some of him alone or with his new girlfriend Emma. There was also a folder with pictures of Emma and her children that Christina had taken from Emma's social media pages. These photos had mean and threatening captions written by Christina. Her search history on the laptop included searches on how to commit a murder without leaving evidence, how to hide crime scenes, and how to avoid being suspected. The police also found a map of Emma and Torny's new house in Christina's notes, along with details about when Torny went to work and came home, and other information about the family's daily routine. Emma's health started getting better. By the end of March, her doctors began to slowly wake her up from the medically induced coma. Although she couldn't speak because of the breathing tube, her eyes were expressive. She recognized her family members in the room but seemed confused about what had happened to her and why she was in the hospital. As soon as Emma was strong enough to talk, the police arranged to interview her. They decided not to tell her immediately about what happened to her children. Emma couldn't remember the events of that day and thought she might have been in a car accident. She kept asking if her children were okay. At first, everyone gave her vague answers, but eventually, her family and the doctors felt they should tell her the truth. When Emma learned that her children had died, she became very upset and hysterical. The doctors had to give her medicine to calm her down, and she fell asleep. When she woke up, she had forgotten the conversation and asked about the children again. This pattern continued for several weeks. Every time she was told about her children, she would forget soon after. A month later, the doctors took Emma back to the house to help her remember. Inside the house, she suddenly recalled everything. She described how she was talking with her sister and preparing dinner while the children played nearby. She remembered opening the door to a knock and seeing a short, dark figure. She asked the figure what they wanted, but then felt a sharp pain and everything went dark. She tried to protect her children but fell in the hallway. Christina insisted she was innocent. The actual weapon was never found, and most of the evidence against her was indirect, which meant she might not be found guilty. However, during the investigation, Christina's roommate mentioned that a hammer had gone missing from her toolkit in March. Christina's roommate showed the police her toolkit. The tools matched the type believed to be used in the murders, but this was still not direct proof. Detectives found video from a bus station showing Christina had traveled to Arbuga 3 times the week before the attack. She couldn't explain why she was there so often, but it seemed she was watching her future victims. Christina also couldn't explain why she searched online for ways to hide a crime or why she collected photos of Emma and her children. On July 29, 2008, Christina's trial for 2 murders and an attempted murder started. She acted very oddly in court. She smiled and waved to people as she entered. When asked about the murders and shown the crime scene photos, she laughed out loud. This behavior made people think she might be insane, but a psychiatric test found she was mentally sound and understood her actions. This meant she enjoyed what she had done and didn't hide her feelings. When Emma saw Christina in court, she fainted. After she woke up, she remembered everything and said Christina's face was the last thing she saw during the attack. Despite her lawyer's efforts to defend her, the jury found Christina guilty on all charges. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of release. Christina was also ordered to pay Emma 20,000 euros for her suffering. There was no proof that Christina had ever been pregnant or had a child with Torny. As for Emma, her recovery was difficult and took a long time, but Torny stayed by her side. They got married in the summer of 2010. The couple now have 2 children together, who know the sad story of their older siblings. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more exciting stories.